Welcome to the Girl Means Business podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Swalls, a former teacher turned entrepreneur, here to help you navigate the messiness of mom life and biz life. Each week, my guest and I will share our experiences, insights, and tips to help you move your business from survival mode to success mode. So grab your favorite drink and let's dive in, because this girl means business. Hey guys, welcome back to the Girl Means Business podcast. Another fun, exciting week here on the podcast because it is Business Besties week. Every month, my friend Katie Brinkley and I do an episode together called Business Besties. It is our second episode. If you missed our first episode, you can go back about 4 episodes back to our first Business Besties episode where we shared our stories about how we became really good friends. We met on Clubhouse. We became friends through social media. We met in real life. We have hung out in a cabin in the mountains together. We talk almost every single day, and we've just built this really incredible friendship around building businesses and raising families and doing things that we love. And we are bringing you these Business Besties episodes every month. The first week of the month, we'll have an episode for you. And this week, Katie and I are talking all about the difference between corporate life, the 9-to-5 life, and running your own business. We both came from having solid 9-to-5 careers that we both really enjoyed and kind of felt like were going to be our path for life, and then kind of fell into the world of entrepreneurship. And it's been an exciting ride, but definitely not one that either one of us expected to have happen in our lives. So in this episode, we're both sharing a little bit about our experiences and the knowledge that we've gained and the pros and cons to building a business for yourself versus working for someone else. And if I'm being completely honest, there have been days where I have thought to myself, this would be so much easier if I just went to a job, clocked in, did the work, clocked out, and went home. Because when you work for yourself, it is 24/7. Even if you tell yourself, I'm going to shut down at 5 o'clock, I'm not going to worry about anything, it's always in the back of your mind. It's always something you're thinking about. You're constantly wondering, like, did I do this thing? Or what about this? Or should I be doing that? Or what about this idea? And when you work a 9-to-5, you don't always have that. However, there are definitely pros to working for yourself, such as setting your own schedule, doing things the way you want to do them and not having to answer to anybody. And so in today's episode, Katie and I are going to share our stories, our journeys, the things that we've learned along the way, and all those pros and cons, and some things that you maybe didn't realize were good or bad about working for yourself. So I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. So let's jump into Business Besties episode number 2 with my friend Katie Brinkley.
Welcome back to another fun episode of Business Besties. My name is Katie Brinkley. I am a social media strategist, and I have been helping small businesses, personal brands, and entrepreneurs with their social media strategy for 18 years now. And I'm joined by my business bestie, Kendra Swalls.
Hey guys, I'm Kendra. I am a business coach helping busy moms to balance business life and mom life so they can be more successful and more productive.
Well, in this week's episode, we are going to talk about corporate life versus entrepreneur life and, what led both Kendra and me to become entrepreneurs. Because I'll be honest, Kendra, you can share your story too, but I like to call myself the accidental entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, same thing. This was not the path. This was not ever my plan in life. I thought I was going to be a teacher for my entire life. That was my plan, or something in the education field. And the idea of starting a business just kind of happened, and it took off from there. And I just sort of went down the path and saw where it was going to go. And it's led to amazing things. Thank goodness.
Well, and I think that that's one of the biggest things that most of us learn as we're growing up. It's okay. You grow up, you go to school, you go to college, you get a degree, and then you go and work for a company. And not very many people are taught along the way, you can go through high school and maybe you could start your own business right then. And entrepreneurship kind of seems to me like it's something that a lot of people fall back on. They fall into entrepreneurship. I know I did. I thought I was going to be a radio reporter forever. And that's what I wanted to do. That was the job that I got. And I will be the first one to raise my hand and say that I gave up on it way too quickly. I was afraid. When Sirius XM came out, I was like, oh my gosh, that's it for the radio industry. Everyone's abandoning ship for TV. I have no TV experience, no television reporting experience. And what am I going to do? And I left. I panicked and I absolutely, speaking to my younger self right now, I should have stuck it out. I should have just waited to see what would happen and continued building my resume so that I could have, maybe right now I would be sitting up in a broadcast booth calling the play-by-plays, which is what my full dream was to be a play-by-play sports reporter for the NFL. And I wish I would have stuck it out longer, but I never even thought about trying to start my own business back then. And if I would have, I wouldn't have started this business, a social media business, because being a social media anything didn't exist. Back 18 years ago, MySpace, that was still a lot of bands and musicians on it. Facebook was still just for people in college only. So I think that everything happens for a reason. And I know there's the saying, at least for friendships, there's a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And I do think that my lifetime goal is to be an entrepreneur. Like, this is kind of what I was made for.
Well, I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a quick question here. So like you say, you wish you had stuck it out. But knowing what you know now about where you are now, and this kind of leads into our topic for today, and we can kind of come back to the story in a second, but this idea of, would you choose entrepreneurship over the corporate world or the job you had? Because if you had stuck it out, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. So do you still think that? Like, do you still think that you should have stayed in that? If it had led you in two different paths, would you still choose the path you're on? Yeah.
Oh, my life would be completely different. And it is interesting too, because we make these decisions, I think, sometimes in the blink of an eye, and we're not realizing how much of an impact it can have on the rest of our lives. I probably, I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. I'd probably be traveling around the country. It'd be really hard to have kids. I think that moms who are in the media, they are superheroes because they work weird hours. They're always traveling, and it is a very, very demanding job. So I don't know if I would have kids. I probably wouldn't be married to my husband. Who knows? And I think that, everything does happen for a reason. I was, like I said, devastated when I left. I thought that I'll just get back into it. Like it was that easy, but I love what I do now. I have the flexibility. I have a company that I love. I put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this company because I am passionate about it. I can work from anywhere. I can choose where I work from. So I think that as I have evolved this business, it really almost becomes that second child.
Yeah. Well, and I think you, and I know that I can say this for myself too, like you have brought the skills that you acquired and like your natural ability in some areas, but the skills you acquired as a, radio reporter and all these things, like you have that, like you bring something unique to what you're doing. I always like to say that no path was ever a mistake. Like I'm someone who's like, I don't want to go back. I don't regret anything that happened in my life. Are there things that I made mistakes on? Are there things that I wish I could maybe go back and do a little bit differently? Probably. But as a whole, I feel like I have made choices that have led me to where I am, and I'm very happy with where I am. But I also can go back and see how, had I not spent 14 years as an elementary school teacher and a math specialist and working in administration, all these things, like I wouldn't have the same skill set that I have now that I think makes me a great business coach, that helps me to connect with people better and to break things down into a very simple terms and strategies for people to follow. And so I think we all bring something from our past and so for you, had you not done that path and jumped right into entrepreneurship, I don't think you would have the same business you have now, because you have this radio presence and this way about you that like, it makes you a great podcast host. It makes you a great Clubhouse moderator. It makes you great doing other things, non-audio related too, but those are skills that you had to acquire before you could do what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And I think that too, it's one, I wouldn't be a social media anything, but I probably would have given up if I would have tried to become an entrepreneur right after leaving the radio station. There's no way I would have had the skill sets and the confidence in trying to build my own company. I think that we want to talk about all of the great parts about being an entrepreneur, the flexible working hours, the ability to earn whatever you want, the ability to change your business model. If that's no longer serving you, hey, guess what? As an entrepreneur, you can go ahead and change it. If you are B2C and you're finding that you enjoy working with B2B better, you can do that. When you're an entrepreneur, it definitely is harder to make those kind of leaps when you are an employee. And I think that too, when you're an entrepreneur, the options for growth are there a lot more. Whereas I want to learn more about XYZ. I know it'll cost this. I'm going to go ahead and invest that in myself and my business because I know it will help the company grow. Where you might have to go through a lot of hoops when you work as an employee if you want to take that same training.
Well, yeah, there's pros and cons to both. I think from my own personal experience, I had a kind of distorted idea of what it would be like to leave my full-time job and go into entrepreneurship. And for me, a lot of what the reasons I left teaching, one, because I had a lot of people that were like, but you have such a great job. At the time that I left, I did, in the world of education, I had a very coveted position, which was I wasn't in the classroom. I wasn't necessarily in administration. I was kind of in this in-between point where I could create my own schedule, sort of. I mean, I still had to be there at certain hours a day, but I got to create the schedule of when I went into classrooms, when I pulled kids to work with, when I worked with teachers. I got to lead trainings. I got to create a curriculum. I got to do all these things. I had a lot of autonomy and it was great, but there were still so many things I was missing, such as I wanted to be in charge of my day. I wanted to be able to say hey, I'm going to go on my lunch break for an hour and run errands. I couldn't do that working where I worked. You didn't leave during the day. You just don't. When you work at a school, you're in there. It's almost like you're trapped from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. You don't leave. Mm-hmm. And if you do, they kind of make a big deal about it. And so, because you're accountable during those hours. And I did not like the fact that I felt like I was trapped on a daily basis. And so I had this idea that if I can get out of this and do my own thing, it's going to be so great because I'm going to have all this time and I'm going to have all this freedom. And while some of that's true, there's a lot else that comes with it as well. So it's definitely, you have to understand the pros and cons of both and really kind of weigh those out, which no one laid that out for me when I was making that decision. And I wouldn't change the decision I made. But it was also it would have been nice to kind of have a little bit more of a realistic idea of what entrepreneurship really was versus the idea I'd created in my head.
Absolutely. And I think that the idea of entrepreneurship, you can work from home, you can work from anywhere. And one of the biggest struggles, that's why I'm sitting here in my office at a co-working space, is that working from home, while it is really, really nice, it is also very, very distracting. One of the biggest struggles for me was, I'm just going to get the laundry started. Well, now I'm just going to put it away. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and pick up the girls' room really fast. So I'm just going to get dinner started. And while all that is productive for being at home, it also was setting me back from getting to that next level for my business. And my husband has said this before, because we've talked about, how could we maybe put a divider up in the basement somewhere so that we both could work from home. And he said to me, he's like, Katie, as much as I would like the idea of it financially, what working from an office has done for you and your business was worth every penny, because it's taken you from being kind of that side hustle sort of mentality to this is your job, and your business has absolutely grown ever since you left home. And I think it is because I left the distractions that were everywhere when I was at home.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've been listening to the Girl Means Business podcast for any amount of time, then my love of email marketing runs deep. Not only is it a great way to generate new leads, but it's one of the most effective methods for nurturing warm leads and turning them into sales. Now, over the years, I've tested several email platforms, and my favorite by far is Flowdesk. Not only do they make email marketing simple and easy, even for the technically challenged, but they have everything you need to create stunning emails, capture leads, make sales, and automate the entire process, giving you time back in your busy day. And the cherry on top is you're only charged one flat fee no matter how many subscribers you have. So while other platforms will increase your price when you go over your pricing tier limit, Flowdesk has no price increases or hidden fees. If you're ready to give Flowdesk a try, click the link below in the show notes to save 50% off your first year. Let Flowdesk help you design emails people will love. Click the link below and check it out. I have a feeling you're going to love it just as much as I do. Yeah, for me, and those distractions are very real. I mean, I'm currently sitting in my office/guest room at home. And yeah, there are days when I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to I'll just do that load of dishes really quick. Or, oh yeah, I was going to clean out the girls' playroom, today or whatever. And it does it. Next thing you know, it's, noon or 1 or 2. And you're like, oh crap, I haven't done the things that were on my to-do list for work. Mm-hmm. But I also I'm not exactly the best Susie homemaker. So I
always like to say I'm an Amazon Prime mom, not an Etsy mom.
Not even close. Pinterest, not even Pinterest. I needed, this was a conversation my husband and I had when I left my teaching job and was working from home. Was he kind of had this idea of well, now that she's home all day, the house will be clean, the laundry will be done, dinner will be ready. We're going to have meal plans, the grocery shopping, all the things. And so he would get kind of frustrated when he would come home and none of that had been done and to him, it looked like I was just sitting at the computer all day. But I was no, I'm doing things. I'm making moves. I'm moving my business forward. So we had to have a really hard conversation, not really hard, but we had to have a heart-to-heart conversation about what exactly am I doing during the day and what are the expectations?
What would you say you do here?
Yeah, exactly. I survive. But I mean, I think it was a really kind of a hurdle we had to get over. And then I had to kind of wrap my brain around the idea that okay, yes, I am working from home. And at the time I had my youngest one was still home with me. And so it was this balance of, it didn't make sense for me to have an office space outside of the home because then I would have had to pay for childcare. And that was kind of the whole point of not having her in childcare. And so it was tough. It was really tough. And if I look back on it, there were months where I didn't move my business forward because I wasn't putting in the effort. And that's one of I wouldn't even call it a con necessarily, but that's one of the things that people don't talk about a lot is the fact that when you are working in a corporate or an office situation where you're someone's employee, you have accountability. You have someone who is saying, these are your goals for this quarter. These are your tasks that you need to get done. These are your X, Y, and Z. When you work for yourself, you're having to say that to yourself. And I always like to joke, I'm a really hard boss and a really lazy employee. And so it's not always the best combination. But yeah, you have to be disciplined and make yourself be disciplined or it's not going to happen.
Well, and during 2020, my husband's office shut down. Now I know that your husband has a different job. So he was still going into the office despite the fact of COVID because he was the term. Why am I blanking on the term?
Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it too.
Not a necessary
essential employee.
Yes, an essential worker. There we go.
Between both our brains, we'll get there.
Well, so my husband came home. We were sharing the home office. He was working from 5 to 1. I was working from 1 until 5:30. So I was now only working about 4.5 hours a day, still trying to grow my podcast. It was really hard. But when I got my office here and left the house, and it was just him at home, he now works from 6 until around 3. He was able to work from home, and I would come home and he was like, I get it, Katie. I understand now why when I would come home from work, sometimes you would be like, can we just go to Target? Can we just go outside and see other human beings and see other adults? And I think that is a very common misunderstanding, or that people that do go to an office every day that have employees that work with them, they don't get how lonely it can be. Even whether you're a solopreneur or you're an entrepreneur with remote team members, it can be a very lonely journey. And just getting out of the house to talk to another adult, it really does make a huge difference. And again, that's why I chose this office that I'm in, because it's in a really high traffic zone. People walk by my office all the time because the kitchen's just 2 offices down that way, and I can see other people, and and he says now that he's home, he's like, I get it now. Like, I get like how hard it was to, why the dishes weren't done. I understand now why you just wanted to go wander around Target just so you could look at other people when I would get home. And I'm like, yeah, it can be lonely.
Yeah. I consider myself a very extroverted person. And I had heard people say like, oh, it's really lonely when you work for yourself and you work from home. And I was like, I'll be fine. Like, I'm a social person. I'll find people to go have lunch with, or I'll go to networking events, and I'll do all these things. And I said all that, but then when reality came in, and I was like, oh no, it's been 3 weeks and I have not talked to another adult that wasn't my husband. I'm like, how does that happen? And so I'm like, if someone like me, who is a very social, outgoing person, can feel that way, I can only imagine if you're naturally an inverted person anyway, that you would go months possibly without talking to somebody else.
Yeah. And I like to consider myself an extroverted introvert. Like, I really like being by myself, reading, playing video games, like with my family. But put me in a crowd and I'll be out there talking. They're an extrovert introvert. My childhood best friend, we became friends in kindergarten because there was a day at school that she was playing on the big kid playground, and all the other kids were over on the kindergartner playground. And I was like, I want to play on the big kid playground. So I went and made friends with this girl. She and I have been friends ever since. She was bridesmaid in my wedding. We were college roommates. We still do stuff together all the time. She is 100% an introvert. Will go through 2, 3, 4 books a week and is fine being by herself. She has since, after COVID, told me COVID and being an introvert really hurt her. And because when it first happened, I remember her saying, oh, I was built for this. I was built to be an introvert during COVID. This is fantastic. I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to see anyone. And we were talking a few weeks ago, and she was saying, she's like, yeah, it's actually gotten really hard for me to get out of the house now. And I find myself getting into this depressive state just because I've gotten so used to being by myself at home that, I like it, but now I've almost become uncomfortable with myself there. So I think that regardless, whether you're extrovert or introvert, too much of being by yourself all day can really grind you down.
Yeah, it messes with your mind. That's why, and granted, when I left my teaching job in 2017. And so at the time I was really building my photography business. And so luckily I was part of a couple of photography, networking groups. I was in the wedding industry. I was a wedding photographer. So I had these wedding industry luncheons once a month that I could go to, and we would have there was a little magazine that I was writing for, and so I would go to their events and all that stuff. So that kept me pretty active. And then I kind of slowly, I still do photography, but I've slowly kind of gotten out of the networking piece of it. And then COVID hit right after I started my coaching business. And so for me, my saving grace with all of that was social media. And I think for a lot of people, but that was my way of being okay, I can't go physically meet up with people. I can't go call a friend and say, let's go to lunch. I can't, go to this networking event. So now I'm going to have to do it virtually. And obviously that's how you and I became friends. That's how I've met a lot of, honestly, I was thinking about this the other day, probably 75% of the people I talk to on a regular basis are internet friends, are people that I have met through social media, through podcasting, through, speaking at things, whatever. And I just, not to say that anything oh, I'm so grateful for this pandemic, but at the same time, if it was good, if it was going to happen, at least it happened when we had all of this technology that allowed us to find ways to still connect with other people. And if you're in a position where you have left your 9 to 5 and you're working now from home, and you're like nodding your head going, yeah, I feel the same way. Like I need connection. Like we have those opportunities, at least like we're not so isolated like we would have been just 20 years ago.
Well, I was going to say even 2 years ago.
Well, yeah.
I mean, really, I think that the pandemic, and it's horrible that it had to happen, but I do feel like trying to find a silver lining from it. And what it did was open up the opportunity for a lot of employers to rethink virtual working, the work from home lifestyle. Because I know my husband's employer, that was an absolute no-go. No, you don't, if you're at home, then you're sick. So you don't work from home. And I think it really changed the thinking for a lot of people with the work from home situation, but it also opened up the opportunity for people to be willing to accept a random message from someone on the internet, to just randomly hop on a Zoom call with somebody that you met on Instagram. That is a situation that I think before, I even remember my uncle said to me, he goes, because we were at that Colorado Avalanche game and there was a Zoom ad on one of the walls. And he goes, what is that Zoom? And I was like, oh, it's an online like video chat meeting tool. And he goes, who does that? Who meets on the computer? And I was like, well, I do. And he was like, well, you're different. You know, you do all that internet stuff. And I'm like, but now it is second nature to just quickly hop on a Zoom call or a GoToMeeting or a Skype call to get to know someone better. And I think that it is something that has really shown a lot of people there. I mean, the Great Recession is going on right now, but it's shown a lot of people that you can work from anywhere and build relationships and build a business now with the way that if you're willing to embrace this technology.
Yeah. Well, and it made me think too, like, so at the beginning of this, we were talking about, or you'd mentioned, you know, the idea that like, yeah, in our day and age, like you didn't, the option of, okay, I'm going to go start a business after high school or college. It wasn't there. Like you think about when, you know, teachers ask kids in school, what do you want to be when you grow up? In our time, it was like, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be like all like these kinds of, like, no one said, I want to start my own company. Like that just did not exist. And what's kind of mind boggling to me was that I grew up in a family that owned their own business. Like
I did too.
But did you ever view it that way? Because I never viewed it that way. I viewed it as my mom going to work. It never occurred to me that she owned the flipping company. You know, like it just, because it wasn't talked about in a way that it's talked about now. You know, it was not a mom owns this company. It was mom has to be at work 6 days a week because, you know, she has to run everything and be in charge of all these employees and make sure things happen. It was never like she's an entrepreneur or a business owner. Those words never came out of people's mouths. It was, that's the family business or that's the company or whatever. And so now, like I look at my kids and I look at like even like the high school kids in our area and I'm like, they see a whole different workforce of like opportunities. They see a whole different field of opportunities that we didn't see. They have a whole different terminology that we didn't have back then. It's like everything has opened up like 2 or 3 times what it used to be because there's so many different opportunities now. There's so many different avenues people can take. You know, there's conversations around starting a business, going to a trade school. Like there's not one specific route. It's not you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job. You know, it's you go to high school, maybe you go to college, maybe you start a business, maybe you take a gap year and travel, maybe you go to trade school, maybe you get a job right out of college because you already know somebody that can help you, whatever. There's all these different options. But I also, as much as I love that, I also think it can be a little overwhelming for some people. And like I said before, I think having that business, like that employee experience helped me be a better entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And I think that one thing I want everybody to walk away with from listening to this episode is that while it's not all rainbows and butterflies, being an entrepreneur, I mean, there's 80-hour work weeks. There are, Kendra, before we hit record here, you said, I get my best ideas at 3 a.m. And, yes. And it's true. I wake up at 3 a.m. every day and I don't know why. I'm still tired. I'm not ready to work out or get my day going. I wake up and at 3 o'clock, I have something to think about with my business. And it's like clockwork. I will roll over and I see it. There's a lot of struggles with being an entrepreneur. But the biggest thing I want people to walk away with is that whether you decide you want to start your own business, or if, being an employee is what makes the most sense for you in your journey, that you're not alone. You can find someone else out there to be on this journey with you, whether you are business besties online, whether you need an accountability partner, whether it's somebody, if it's your boss, if you're an employee and your boss you look up to. I know I looked up to my boss at the television station tremendously. And it was her word saying, Katie, I would love to see you start your own social media business. Then I'm where I am today. I took her words and I ran with it. We are still in communication. We still talk to each other. We see each other maybe once a year, and it's invaluable to me. So I think that as you decide your entrepreneur journey, or if being an employee is the right route for you, look for those other people that can be on this journey with you.
Yeah. And I want to say one more quick thing about too, I think we need to address too the in between. I think that there are a lot of people who they want to start a business but they're like, but I love my job. I know some people are like, I absolutely love my job that I have, my 9 to 5, but I also have this passion project, this other thing I want to do. And it's okay to have a foot in both places. And there are people who do that really well too. So I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that it doesn't, a lot of people say leave your corporate job and go all into your business. Or, some people aren't just made for business. They're made to work for somebody else. I think there's also a group of people in the middle that can have their full-time 9 to 5 job and also build this business on the side. And, and that's totally fine too. You have to find what makes the most sense for you, for your family, and for what time and energy you're willing to put into it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And as always, you can find any links or resources mentioned in today's show down in the show notes. And if we're not friends outside the podcast yet, then what are you waiting for? Come find me on Instagram at Girl Means Business and send me a DM letting me know what you thought of today's episode or any of the past episodes you've listened to. You can also take a screenshot of today's episode and post it to your stories, tagging at Girl Means Business, and I'll give you a shout out on my page. I love connecting with you and hearing all about your business and can't wait to get to know you more. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will meet you back here next week, same time, same place.